Hi guys. So I'm going to put this video somewhere up here just to kind of walk you through the below, just as a way to kind of explain what you're seeing below. But it should be pretty clear from how it's written out, kind of what an outline for an argumentative essay consists of. But a good argument, any argument, consists of three things: a claim, the reasons, and then the counter argument and the rebuttal. So I kind of talked about this in your first essay assignment explanation, but I'm going to go into it with a little more detail here. When you have an argument, you need to make a thesis claim. This is basically the topic and the stance that your argument is taking. So, for example, the example we have here is that the argument is, I should believe that we should legalize marijuana on a federal level. So this is an actionable claim. It's something that can be acted upon in a very specific way. It's feasible. So it's something that has specific details as to how we're going to do this. So you're talking about legalizing it on the federal level, not the state level. And you're talking about the legal implications of marijuana, not any other decriminalization or whatever it might be. So again, this doesn't have to be something you personally believe. But it is the stance and the argument that you're making. So the topic here is broad. It's legalizing marijuana, and the stance is arguing for the legalization of it. And then within each argument, this is typically included, obviously, in your introduction. So your audience knows what you're arguing for or against, and what the main ideas are. An outline here will consist of three reasons. Now, typically we say three. This is like the normal, body paragraph section. Three is just a good rule of thumb for an essay of this sort of length. You can always have more. I would not have just one. I would make sure you have at least two, but three is typically a good guideline. In your outline, you'll have three reasons. And this is also something that should be included in your thesis claim. So you don't just want to say, I believe we should legalize marijuana on the federal level. You should include the reasons. And the reasons might be something, and I'm going to make these up, but it's like the state will benefit because it gives them taxable revenue. It gives them medical patients easier access to medicinal marijuana. And kind of eliminates the need to navigate the state laws. And then that it will in certain confines, it will decriminalize minor drug offenses. So it'll reduce jail populations and the constraints on the American taxpayer. So those are very logical, valid, feasible reasons. So in my thesis claim, I want to make sure to include a mention of what my reasons are. So I might say, I believe that we should legalize marijuana on a federal level because it will create taxable revenue for states. It will give patients easier access to medicinal marijuana and decriminalize minor drug offenses. That would be my full thesis claim. This is where, again, you'll kind of structure the body of your essay. So it'll be reason 1, 2, and 3. And for each one of these, you're actually going to have your evidence as well. In your first essay, the evidence is just going to be some logical reasoning around these concepts. So you don't want to just leave it as the main idea, the reason, the topic sentence. You want to elaborate and expand with your thoughts and your logic and your reasoning that helps prove that point. In a typical essay, you would include, say, for example, additional research also that can help prove your point. But the point is that you want to hear your voice. You want to hear the logic and the reasoning behind this. You want to make the logic explicit for your audience rather than implicit. So that means that you tell them the logical connections rather than leaving it up to them to make those connections. So say, for example, you want to say it would give, taxable revenue to states for sales. You might then explain in a couple of sentences why that is or how that works. So you would say right now, each state has different laws. They govern their own state, revenue, or they govern their own legal requirements for the legalization of marijuana. Say if you live in Washington, D.C., there's one rule. If you go across the border to Virginia, there's another rule. And you could bring in evidence that proves why legalizing it helps. Say, bring in taxable revenue. You could say, for example, and I'm making this up, but you could say, for example, in Colorado, a state that has legalized marijuana for X number of years, they've seen a blah, blah, blah increase in tax revenue from the sale of legalized marijuana, which has only, increased the health of their Colorado economy. But something like that is good evidence that you could bring in as logical reasoning to support your concepts. Within the essay, you also want to make sure that you are aware that there are other points of view and then refute them. So, for example, think about any political speech that you've seen. You might have a candidate on stage saying that we should do X, Y, and Z, and they'll always pause to say, now I'm aware that not everybody agrees with this, or I'm aware that some people think X, Y, and Z instead, or I'm aware that my opponent thinks X, Y, and Z. And then they'll make a concession and they'll say, while this is an interesting idea, it won't work because of blah, 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 blah. So essentially, you will need to acknowledge that there are other points of view, because what it does is it brings your audience in so that you don't isolate that audience. You're trying to get people who agree with you to believe you, and then also people who don't agree with you or maybe are in middle of the fence to come to your side. And by acknowledging that there are other points of view that aren't yours, you're giving credibility to those, but then you also need to refute them. You don't just want to leave it out there and say, yes, there is this other idea, and that's it, because that undercuts your argument. So the counter argument is the other point of view. The rebuttal, or sometimes you call it a refutation, that is you disproving that other point of view. So your essay is going to need to have at least 2 of these. So, for example, in the example above, you would say, now, while I think that we should do this because of X, Y, and Z reasons, some people would argue that marijuana has harmful side effects that we need to keep people protected from by keeping it illegal. Your rebuttal would say, while this is a valid concern, a CNN study found, that the reduction in mental faculties of casual marijuana use is only 5% as compared to 15% in alcohol. If alcohol is really impacting your brain and is legal, more impacting your brain is legal, then a less harmful side effect should also be made legal. So the logical reasoning here is very clear. It's not an emotional argument. It's not something where he says, well, they're just wrong. It's making a very logical connection to disprove the opposing point of view or the counter argument. So you'll have to do that at least twice in this essay, and then you write it. Now, where to put this is up to you. You can put it within your main ideas, or you can put it at the end as a different section. I will say a more advanced essay typically will put it within the main ideas. But in this case, if it's more comfortable, you can put it at the end just to kind of make it very clear that you're aware of these opposing points of view. And then, just like all of your essays, you'll want to write a conclusion. So the conclusion shouldn't be just a one-sentence blip. It should fully wrap up the argument, signal to your audience that you are wrapping things up. So, in conclusion, or ultimately this means blah, 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 blah. You'll want to restate your thesis claim and your reasons in new words. So you don't need to restate it exactly. You definitely don't want to copy it. But in this case, for example, conclusion might say, ultimately, the legalization of marijuana will benefit not only the federal government, but states and a number of people who are currently, hurting in the current system. It will add value to state revenue. It will assist those who need medicinal, marijuana for specific needs without causing, inconvenient travel across states. And it will, reduce minor drug offenses, blah, 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 blah. And that would be your conclusion. So that's hopefully an in-depth explanation of how a good argument is structured. You'll see on the next assignment where you do create this outline, there is a template for you. You can use that template. You can adjust it a little bit if you need to. But I've just given you the same, what I've done above, just giving you a very quick example here about laptops in the classroom. what the claim is in the top. So that's the topic. The claim is that they should not be allowed in the use of classroom, and then the reasons, the opposing views, and etc. So when you guys are working on your outline, make sure you kind of have all of these elements. And when you kind of piece those together for your essay, you're adding some more context, some more depth, but the structure should be there for you. So if you have questions, let me know, but otherwise, hopefully this is a helpful explanation.